Sony are literally beset on all sides at the moment, from Nikon, Canon, and even to a certain extent Fujifilm with the new Eterna camera. Today what I've got is the Canon C50. Gotta be one of my favourite intros, especially with the two knocking each other out in the background. We're putting the C50 through its paces, doing an entire small documentary on a Welsh wrestler called Brendan, who is the owner of New Wave, this being the last game that he plays at the show before he goes mainstream into the promoter side of things. We're going to see a lot of crazy action, a lot of tests with the autofocus, the ISO, the image quality. Hopefully, by the end of this, you'll realise that Nikon's victory is not that clean cut. This camera is awesome. Now, if you've watched this channel for a little while, you know I shoot on the FX3 just in general. It's an absolutely awesome camera. Genuinely has been one of the best cameras and the best tools that I've ever had within my career. The other manufacturers are starting to catch up, and although I think maybe Nikon may have won this particular round, I will, however, say that I don't think it's a complete victory. I still think that this camera is the one to look at, and we're going to find out why. It has XLR input on the top. The video specs are generally pretty awesome across the board. You get some really great footage, and what best to really test this out than in the wrestling environment. I really wanted to put this camera through its paces because it's something that I'm personally a little bit excited about, but also it's a camera that is trying to dethrone the FX3 for one of the most capable cameras on the market. And spec for spec, it's interesting. We'll get into that in a second. What I wanted to do though with this when it came to the wrestling environment is pretty much put it through every lighting situation that's not perfectly lit. You know, you're shooting run and gun, you don't have enough time to light everything perfectly all the time, or, you know, really control what you're doing. Can this camera really do something and create a video that I am ultimately proud of? Please check out the full documentary. It should be released around this time, and, you know, I hope you enjoy. You're going to see me seeing a lot of footage that I took on the day before when I was testing it out and checking to see what settings I wanted to really use for documentary purpose. When it comes to the wrestling, you're going to see that straight after the specs, but we're going to go in depth, in detail as to everything with the camera right now. The body of the camera is what you're expecting from a Canon FX3, and I'm sorry that I keep mentioning the FX3, but it's the closest comparison we have, right? So you've got a bunch of screw points on the outside to be able to rig it up as and where you like to shoot. The other side of it, it does actually come with an XLR top handle, and this, I got to say, feels a lot better than the FX3 counterpart. From there, you do actually have a cold shoe on the top of this top handle, as well as a record button, a lock switch, and a zoom rocker. On the left hand side, you then have all the controls and switches that you would expect out of a XLR handle on one of these cameras, which is something the top handle for the Sony has been missing stupidly from the start. Last thing about the hot show here is the fact it actually fits the mic perfectly. So for the majority of the stuff that you see me facing the camera or interviewing people, I do actually use the Sennheiser MKE600, and it fits perfectly. On the FX3, I had to 3D print a part for it not to fall out. Canon have actually started to go through the hot shoe for their mics, which is actually really useful here, and this is where the top handle fits. I believe more accessories for the top of the Canon will come in the future, and maybe even some third-party. Top handle though fits in, and I must say the screws on the side that come in are nice and springy, so they just pop out when you've actually got it out. I will say the screws on the FX3 are just a little bit better in this respect. On the side of the camera you have HDMI as well as your timecode inputs, USB-C, and then you've got your mic and headphone inputs there as well. And this camera actually takes a CF Express card as well as an SD. On the bottom of the camera you do actually have a tripod pin and as well as a tripod screw like you'd expect. It would have been quite nice if they did something similar to the FX2 where you've actually got two screws in there for security when you're putting this on a gimbal. Essentially what you've got in this package here is a camera that has a full frame 32 megapixel sensor. You can shoot 40 frames a second. It can do photo, and I've taken a number of photographs with it today. However, it's really meant for cinema purposes, being the fact that it's called a C50. What you've got here is a 7K 60p monster. It can do open gate, and That's one of the main factors that I really like about it. In fact, I tested out a little bit yesterday with shooting some content in the store. Go.
I need you. I need you so badly to come and buy this cap. I actually watched a video the other day on the most expensive lens cap ever sold. £1,000. Makes these look like a bargain. $4.99 respectively across all filter thread sizes. Come and pick them up now. If you like your phone as much as me, make sure you save them. Grab a disposable camera, get a nice flash on them, just to develop them after as well. Come to Camera Centre, we'll send off for development as well. What's one I like? $19.99. Bargain. It's the best way to get into film.
Ready?
Okay, I'll be made to do this. Can I get a Hoya filters? Come pick them up from him as well. This one's a nice polarizer, 58mm. Get it on, whack it on. Get rid of those reflections. Perfect.
I'm totally not bullying Alfie in order to do just a bunch of advertising and checking out the open gate on this on the camera. And this is the audio from the Sennheiser MK E600. Pretty good mic. And this is handheld with a 20-70, so it might be a bit shaky because it's very heavy. OpenGate allows you to film in the full width of the sensor, so this is a 3:2 image rather than 16:9, giving you a lot more options for crop ratios when it comes to doing social media content.
2, 1. SD cards. These are just adapters, it's fine. But these ones would be the ones I'd be going for. A dual card. It's nice. A lot of big cameras have dual cards these days. 128GB is a good capacity as well. These are V60, 4K capacity. £92 compared as well. It's a bit of a bargain compared to what you would pay for single.
And it performed really well. I even did a little bit of colour grading pretty much straight away and was actually surprised at quality that I got out of it. And this is coming from the perspective of, in the shop we don't necessarily have crazy good lighting. It's okay, it's pretty good for the shop, but it's not perfect. But shooting these reels and comparing the two footage between shots that I've taken with the FX3 and then shots that I've taken with the C50, you can really tell that I believe in situations where you can't control it, the C50 actually does come out on top here. So, Canon colours, full frame sensor, 7K 60, you got 4K 120, full sensor readout here, as well as shooting 2K 180. And the thing I found interesting about the 2K 180 was the fact it's only really just above HD. In fact, I believe it's a 2048 by 1080 ratio, so it is essentially HD, but sounds fancier with 2K. That is where it differs a little bit from the Nikon ZR, is the fact that it actually does a full frame readout for both of those frame rates. The ZR only does 120p, but cropped in 4K. You've also got 4K downsampled in this, as well as a bunch of different extra modes, just making this just a very interesting and very powerful camera. So this is the internal RAW from the Canon, and at the highest setting I could only film around about 6 to 8 minutes, I think it said, for a 128GB card. Moving on over into the 4K 50p, this is a pretty good looking footage all in all. It has great to normal range, works out between the two different light situations really well, and pretty happy with it overall. This is what I'm probably going to be shooting the majority of the stuff with, as it was giving me over an hour worth of content, and I'm going to be putting a 256GB SD card, V6 actually, in the camera as well. But overall the performance here was pretty good, and something to actually say is the autofocus. It's still something I'm getting used to, but for the most part when it was people talking, it tracked it pretty well and grabbed the subject accurately. That was what was quite impressive about it in many different lighting situations, and this is what we're going to come back to later when it comes to the wrestling. It performed. With me popping into this embroidery shop because I kind of fancy having a hat, because my hair is always all over the place in all the videos. So did you want to give yourself a little shout out on the channel? Yeah.
So we are on the process of cleaning up this hat, which has been stitched with a 3D embroidery. So we are on the process
at this
of
point,
it.
I didn't realise that you actually needed to turn the XLR handle on, and this is the same with the FX3. But, oopsie, so this is actually the scratch audio directly from the camera, and it actually works out pretty well. A bit of noise cancellation, and I feel like we could have actually had a usable audio out of that if you do have a habit of making mistakes here and there. okay, maybe I do. Now, I think one of the main things to really talk about here is the size of it. It is a little bit bigger than the FX3, and the FX3 is actually what I'm shooting on at the moment. So it's a little bit heavier, and I've definitely decided to pick the heaviest lens to put on it, and that is of course the 28-70 f2. And this is where my first gripe comes in, something I was really annoyed at when I first heard about it, and that was the fact that it doesn't have IBIS. Most cameras, especially at this price point, should have IBIS. However, it didn't really affect what I managed to get. The added weight and the feeling and the ergonomics of the camera really worked out to its benefit. It does also come with some of the best digital stabilization I think I've seen, and this was a thing that I thought was going to be a problem, and it wasn't, surprisingly. And I will admit, it's a dream combo. The shots that I've got out of it so far, including a little bit of an interview, some general setup shots here before the event actually happens, have actually come out together pretty well. And it's going to be interesting to see how it develops throughout the day. And I'm going to be doing a lot of creative style shoots with the wrestlers here. The other great thing about this is because you've got that dual native ISO, and it's one of the things that would make me change to a different camera other than the FX3 is a decent ISO range. So. And to talk more on that note, these shots here were actually taken at 6400 ISO in a badly lit church. Like, badly to the point where I was quite surprised I was managed to get anything out of it. I didn't bring lights with me because I wanted to make this as run and gun as possible. And it performed really well, and especially the footage here, because I did underexpose it a little bit and I had to pull that back. And yes, there is grain, but overall, the shot is still usable, and that makes this experience for me more and more tempting towards this camera, and even to a certain extent over the Nikon. Really testing out the 800 to 6400 ISO values is going to be really important to see where this steps in this fight that is going on for the most superior creator camera, because this is not as crazy as what you'd expect out of the C70, C80, but it's actually a very capable camera, and hopefully you're going to see that today. So make sure you keep on watching. You're going to get a lot of action, a lot of crazy stuff, and also check out the video on new wave that I make out of this camera. I think it's going to come together really well, and at the moment, as it stands, I am impressed. We're now after the shoot, and I'm left really wondering. Originally, I had planned to do a comparison between the C50 and the FX3, but by the time the final match rung, I've realised I pretty much almost obsessively used the C50, and that's something that I never really thought, because I did bring the FX3 with the 2470 just as a pure backup, just in case it didn't perform well in low light and I still needed to get some good shots. I knew that the FX3 would be able to do it, which again is something that is quite surprising for me, because I rely on this camera, the FX3, and if I was to ever change, and I've been thinking about it for a while because I like the idea of a new challenge, the Canon C50 is one of the options, and it's one that I am really considering right now, as it has a lot of things that I really want in my next camera. The open gate, and the way in which open gate really makes things better for shooting is because it uses a larger part of the sensor. It means the accurate information when it comes to what the camera actually sees is retained, and that's something the guys at New Wave might actually want to do, is take a lot of the interviews and post them onto socials, in which they do have a lot of capability there with the footage that I actually shot with them. And especially when it came to Brendan's interview, which is the main one that I shot on OpenGate, you can see that the possibility is there a hell of a lot more. Now, yes, it's not necessarily the end-all and be-all of what you really need, but having a decent ISO range for someone like me who does a lot of run-and-gun shooting is really important. Now, do I think that the FX3 could have handled the lighting inside of the church a little bit better? I honestly do, because you do have that 12,800, and I do like shooting with it. But what I would say is this 6400 on the high end is good enough to be able to get by with a camera that can also take photos, because when I am on projects, sometimes I get asked to take photos. This can do that really well. It can do the video side of it really well. It can do the open gate 7K, having the ability to crop for 7K 60, you know, all of these things that are absolutely fantastic, including having one of the most valuable things, which is the 4K 120, as I do like using it for slow motion, having a bit of flow to my footage that I take, and just adding something else a little bit extra. These are all come to a really cool head, and having a camera that is capable pretty much across the board. Now, when we compare this conversely to the Nikon ZR, which I'm hoping to get on this channel, so make sure you like, follow, subscribe if you want to see more. And it's another camera that's in the running for what I get next. And, you know, although spec for spec they're fairly similar and the Nikon is a lot cheaper, you do have pros and cons to each one, right? So you've got a 32-bit float on the Nikon ZR, but you've got a top handle with the ability to use XLR mics on this one. So it kind of goes to and fro between which one's actually going to be most valuable to you. For me, I think the larger body actually helps with the stabilization, as well as keeping it cool and able to shoot for longer. Remember that the Nikon ZR hasn't actually got that long actual spec for shooting longer form video, i.e. shooting press conferences, wedding ceremonies and stuff like that. You can do about an hour and a half, which is just about enough, but in some situations, especially with speeches in conferences, that goes on for longer, and the Nikon doesn't necessarily fill me with a massive amount of confidence to do that. However, it's going to be interesting to test it out once we actually get it in our hands. The feel of the story, the love everyone had there, was important to capture. You know, the friendships, the interactions between people, how people react to things, even to a certain extent capturing those smiles that only happen for a second when they break character in the ring. It was fascinating, and this camera allowed me to capture it really well. Is it going to be the camera for me? Well, I need to try out the Nikon ZR next. And if I'm honest, I do feel like there is something going to be coming from Sony. An FX3 II might be interesting. But I will say, with Canon's first FX3 styled cinema camera, this one is surprisingly good. And I feel like when it comes to what happened with the FX3, when it first came out, people were like, why? It's a pointless camera. Now it's widely regarded as one of the best cameras on the market, but it doesn't necessarily have the best spec. This is why I feel certain things, certain choices with the design of the Canon may not be to everyone's liking, but it doesn't necessarily mean this isn't actually a fantastic camera, because it is. It creates great footage, you get great colors, you get a really good autofocus system, but also so things like the simultaneous recording now may not necessarily be super important to have that, but it's nice to have it. The point is here that specs are very important, but what it really comes down to is how good is it and how fun it is to actually use in this situation. And the fact that I didn't touch my FX3 throughout this, I think, makes you think. The Canon C50 has inspired me and has interested me into looking into Canon and taking them a lot more serious for my day-to-day shooting. I'd really like to know your opinions, because that's what really matters. What do you think of this new C50 camera? Do you think it's going to take over the FX3, or are you like a lot of people where they feel the Nikon ZR is the more interesting looking camera now? And is it nice to see the FX3 finally almost being dethroned?